welcome to the next segment in the Gas Goblin build. I'm Carrie Shirley with Gas Powered Thoughts. In this step we're going to add some components to the model that are not common for electric models. We are converting a donor model which was electric. They generally don't have separate power systems for the air electronics or throttle servos, but since this is now a gas helicopter, we're going to need to install both of those things. So in this step we're going to focus on getting the throttle servo and linkage in place, install the battery for the receiver, and the power system in general. We'll also complete the wiring and get the model ready for the final step. So let's get going. As I mentioned earlier, we're converting an electric helicopter, so there's some parts that you'd need to run a fuel-based helicopter that aren't going to be found on one of those, primarily in the electronics area, and that's what we're going to add here. First off, you're going to need a battery of some sort to drive the onboard electronics. There's not going to be a BAC running off the main battery packs, so that's what that's for. And you need to transfer that from the front of the model to the back of the model, because that's where your receiver and FBL controller are. So this is a custom-made part you'll have to make. Now I'm using a Fromco battery adapter. This is an off-the-shelf part that lets you connect these large EC3 connectors into the smaller receiver connectors. It's very simple to use. You also need a throttle servo and a throttle control arm. This is the standard align part from the required parts. I'm also using standard aligned servo nuts to attach it to the frame. The last thing here is called a stator-gator, and this is a device that allows you to convert the ignition pulse into something that you can plug into your governor so that it reads the RPM. Very simple to use. We're going to start off here by installing the throttle servo. It goes in this position on the left frame. It installs from the inside of the frame, and then you use the Align servo mount system, which is just a couple of bolts, some plates, and some plastic servo nuts to retain this into position. Nothing special about that. It's typical for servo installation. The control rod that goes between the servo and the carburetor is from the required parts list. It's actually a head control rod from an Align G700 DFC. The exact length of this is on the build thread. It'll vary depending on what servo you use, as will the position on the control arm, depending on what setup you happen to like. The battery needs to go on the front battery tray. Make sure it's strapped in well, and then you have to construct this transfer cable to get the power from where the battery is back to where the electronics mount on a Goblin, which is behind the rotor head. Now, as you can see, I've got quite a few wires here on top of the model. I've got them vibration protected and strapped in. This cluster back here will be covered by the canopy, so it won't be visible once the canopy's on. Inside the frame there's still some more wires. They're strapped against the sides of the frames and they're out of the way of the tail belt. You can also see the stator-gator here that's mounted on that little tray. Here we're going to install a tail boom. It installs exactly like any other Goblin tail boom. Simply attach it and then connect the tail drive belt as well as the tail rotor servo connector. Now I use a servo clip to make sure these things don't come loose from vibration. In fact, I've used them on every connector in the entire electronics set just to make sure they stay secure. I've also used an adhesive on the connectors on the electronics to make sure they stay in place as well. With the electronics installation completed, there's just a few more components we need to put into place before the model's finished. And that's what we're going to do in the next step.